Let's get straight to the point with views from both sides of the aisle. We now welcome back Austin Barber and Brandon Jones to our MPB studios. Austin's a Republican strategist and founder of the Clearwater Group. Brandon is an attorney and former Democratic member of the Mississippi House of Representatives. Gentlemen, welcome back to At Issue.
Thanks. Good to be here.
All right, so the Senate has a Medicaid plan. It's essentially what was leaked last week. So real quick, let's kind of look at what is and isn't in the plan. And I'm going to start here. It covers up to 100% of the federal poverty rate. That's a little over $15,000 for a single person, $31,000 for a family of four, and it has a work requirement of 120 hours per month. Those are the two big things. There's other things in there, but really sparse down from traditional Medicaid expansion. So the first question is, like, kind of thinking about these numbers, and Austin, I'll leave this with you because we were talking, who is the Senate plan designed to cover? If we're talking about, let's get more people health insurance coverage, who is this going to cover?
The thought is there's 80 to 100,000 people that it is designed to cover. Again, I mean, your summary was pretty spot on. These are people who are at 100%. Brandon, correct me here, but I think currently Medicaid covers up to 77%. Is that the number? 77. So we're talking about 23%, 78 to 100%. Actually, 99%. It's less than 100. Let me say that precise. So it's the folks that fall into that category. They have to work essentially 30 hours a week. There are some other people that it covers. As I'm looking at the language here in front of me, again, these are anyone who have a child under 6 years old will be eligible for Medicaid. They don't have to have a work requirement. There's no work requirement involved. That's probably a single mom, most likely, who's raising a young child. Anyone who is qualifies as a caregiver for their parent, for their child, for their spouse. And then, so there's some other things. There's some other groups of people that actually are eligible for this plan. So,
are those people that are eligible, or those people that get an exemption from the work requirement? Because those are two separate things.
Well, I think I would say back to you. I think that there's the same thing. They are eligible, just like people who would be, just like people who would qualify because they meet the work requirement, which is they're working 30 hours a week, or they could also be a full-time student at in a university or a junior college, or they're in a trade school. Those types of situations. So all these different groups that we just described, if the Senate plan becomes law, they would all fall within the eligibility spectrum.
Yeah. Well, you've heard that, Brandon. I mean, is that enough? I mean, we're talking about traditional expansion, upward of 200,000 added people on the rolls. This is ballpark 80ish. That's if everyone who's eligible or presumed eligible actually gets on Medicaid. I mean, is that enough? Is that enough people? Is that the right people? Is that who needs it?
Yeah. Well, I kind of like your terminology there, right? I mean, I think you should have access to health care, whether you have a job or not. I think we're mixing up things, and you all know that. I lost my religion on here a couple times about this expansion stuff because I think there's a moral imperative for our state to do better.
It's an REM reference, by the way, for those who are old enough to know.
That's right. So, I mean, I do think that we should do better. I think that, we have two versions now. I like the House version better, as we've discussed. I mean, it's more of what you think of as fulsome expansion up to that 138% of the poverty level.
Before you move on, I mean, you said we have two versions. Technically, we don't have two versions right now because the Senate took the House bill, did a strike all,
right.
Replaced all the House language with their language. So right now,
theoretically,
theoretically, I mean, the House has their ideas, the Senate has their ideas, but as it is on paper right now we only have the Senate plan.
Yeah, no, that's a meaningful distinction. Actually, I guess we should say we have two positions.
Yeah.
We have the House position, we have the Senate position, and what I assume we're looking at now is this moment where we decide, do we keep this thing going, and then we battle it out in conference, which is where a lot of these big decisions get made.
We have a third position. That's the governor's position.
Right. We're going to get to
Matters
that.
in this. So I just wanted to.
So look, I'm displeased that we're this late in the session, Austin, and we don't have alignment over doing a full Medicaid expansion. It's the best deal going for states that need to do what we need to do, which is close the coverage gap. We've talked about this a lot in the past. There are many places around this state where you just don't have access to emergency care. And then in those places where you do, we have too many people who are using emergency rooms as their doctor's offices. And so getting out in front of preventative care, we lead the nation in heart disease, we lead the nation in diabetes, trying to take care of those things before they get to critical stages would alleviate a lot of the burden that current insurance holders are doing. I mean, there's a moral piece of this, and there's just, I think people ought to have access to health care. And then there's an economic piece to this where it would alleviate a lot of the unnecessary costs that we're paying now because we're only triaging patients rather than dealing with them as they go. So I wish the conversation were in a different posture. And nothing has changed over the course of the week to make me wish that Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosman was doing more to get a better expansion bill out of the Senate. And I'm frustrated because this is an issue that he campaigned on.
Can I argue
and
with
yet
you?
here we are. Sure.
Can I argue with you?
Yeah, please.
You
what
know,
we're here for, buddy.
That's right. Particularly when you have a black White Sox
it's opening day.
The baseball guy here. So you remember the legislature. You realize you gotta sometimes keep the ball going down the field.
Yeah.
And there's no question that is somewhat of the scenario here. Okay, I don't want to say it's the whole scenario because they are working on legislation in the Senate. That is exactly what we just described. But if they were to kill it, if Delbert Hosman said, nope, not voting on it, or we ain't got the votes, or whatever he wanted to say, then it just stops. There is no opportunity to maybe have the House win as you would like to see, or the Senate win as some people would like to see. So, I mean, I think you have to give Delbert Hosman some credit for saying, okay, let's get this passed. He put a lot of effort and time into this, so let's get this passed and try to move on to the next step, which is the next procedural step in the legislative process, which is most likely headed to conference. Right. And then they try to get a deal worked out.
You know, what we've seen in the lieutenant governor is in those moments when he truly cares about an issue, he takes center stage and he works that chamber in a way that's direct and in a way that, you know, he's been quite successful at. We have not seen that. We have not seen the vocal counterbalance to the governor saying we're not going to have it. We haven't seen articulating what the points of the Senate plan would be until the 11th hour. And all of those things play a role in how effective you can be at outflanking some of the opposition to expansion. And this goes back to what we've said before. This was an issue that he supposedly cared about and then has been largely quiet on for weeks while this battle is raging on. And we all know in politics, if you're being quiet and the other side is filling that vacuum, you put your side at a disadvantage. And so I think presuming that he cares about this issue, he's gotten outflanked by the governor, and I think that's why we're in this kind of depleted state today.
Well, go ahead, because I have a question to that.
15 seconds or less.
Yeah, I have a question to that point.
You can't say presumably, my friend. He does care about this issue. This issue is important to him. I think you're right. Sometimes these leaders, Speaker, Lieutenant Governor, and Governor, take different stances openly. He's clearly been working on this bill with his membership. He's clearly been having individual conversations with those who are on the fence or trying to move some from no to a yes. And, you know, the results are going to be seen when the bill gets passed or doesn't get passed.
Yeah, I just got to take your word for it. There's not a lot of proof of that.
I understand.
And so for some clarity, we're having this conversation on Thursday around 1 o'clock. The Senate is anticipated to take up this bill around, well, when they reconvene at 1:30. We're presuming that it's going to pass. We don't know what the numbers are, but based on all the politicking and the whipping, then the reason why we're at where we're at with the Senate is because they wanted to be able to present something on the floor that carried the 2/3 threshold, right?
And we do think
60%.
And we do think it passes
because it's a revenue bill. You're right that they are thinking we would have to overcome a governor's veto, but first step is just passing off the floor, which is a 3/5 vote, which will be 31 votes if all 52 members are there.
And we expect that to be the case.
I do.
Yes, and that's to the point that you were mentioning earlier, Brandon, about the governor outflanking the lieutenant governor, and to your point, Austin, earlier about there being a third position. I'm going to start with you here, Brandon, because you've again a member of the legislature. When was the last time you've seen a governor lobby the legislature so hard against a policy? We often see a governor trying to whip up support for a policy priority they have, but this governor's been very active to say to lobby senators, have them at the mansion as early as as recent as this Tuesday, against a policy.
Yeah. I mean, Austin's got an example in the holster. I'm thinking about it. I mean, look, Governor Barber was quite effective at lobbying the legislature for and against a whole host of things. It was he was an operator in a way that was unique at that point in Mississippi history, and he had a professional class lobbying operation, and it was amazing the number of people individually that he would touch on a given issue, Democrat or Republican. We saw the great use of the bully pulpit by Phil Bryant. I didn't agree with Governor Bryant on many things, but you can't deny his ability to get people kind of up in a frenzy about things. But what I have noticed about this, Austin, what I think is notable about Governor Reeves is Governor Reeves has not been, in my estimation, somebody who has spent a lot of political capital on some of these legislative fight. He's kind of let it come to him and then make the decision at this point. I think it's a political calculation. I think he thinks this is what MAGA Republicans want him to do. It's something that his party's leader talks about a lot. Donald Trump talks a lot about we don't like health care programs. So I think he feels like he's doing what is MAGA orthodoxy. And so he's being more forceful in this argument than he typically is. We have not seen this type of exertion out of Tate Reeves many times. And so that was my note on this as well. He's really getting exercised over it. He hasn't been effective with the House, but clearly he's been more effective with the Senate.
Where he used to, where he served and where he has a lot of relationships built up.
Just quick, the best example is Haley in 2004 on tort reform. Legislature didn't want to do it when Musgrove was governor. He had a long session, didn't get it done, and Haley was working the opportunity to call he did call a special session within a session and got it done. That was as involved as a governor has probably ever been in modern history. With the legislature working to get an issue taken care of.
Yeah, that's a get an issue taken care of. This is a governor working to kill something that's coming out of the legislature, like working pretty hard to kill something coming out of the legislature to the point where the Senate is crafting a piece of legislation that if it has to go to the governor and gets vetoed, it might be palatable for certain, like you say, maybe MAGA Republicans to say, okay, well, I can still vote for this because it doesn't include a lot of federal money.
It's one of those times, too. I mean, we're just coming off of the election year. During the election, I would say this was the number one issue that was raised by Brandon Presley. The point was made, look, Tate Reeves doesn't want to expand Medicaid. If I get a chance to be governor, I'll expand Medicaid day one. And it's playing out exactly as you said. So, I mean, this was a huge dividing issue.
But Presley did
Tate
lose.
Reeves won the election.
Yeah.
And
Presley did lose.
And no, he lost. I mean, no question. But I'm saying you rarely see it in real time this quickly where he says, this is the issue, this is what matters. And then as soon as the election's over, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Real quick, just looking forward, it likely, what the Senate passes, there's I imagine a great chance that it doesn't pass in the House. It will not resemble what the House put together. Is this going to get a conference? Does the House just decide to let it die? I mean, there's this question: do you let it die? And then if it does go to conference, what could we be possibly looking at?
I don't see a reason why this bill would die. I mean, why would I'm not sure.
I don't think
no,
it would,
but it's an option. You have to ask that question. I just think this thing's headed to conference, and we'll have 2 or 3 or more weeks or 4 weeks at the most debate about what can be salvaged.
And then to that point, Brandon, you mentioned the lieutenant governor. Is that a time where he tries to pull some leverage and see if there's some of those votes that don't go with the traditional expansion right now? Maybe he can get some over in that camp.
And look, when we're critical of individuals in the process on this program, a lot of times it's because they can do something about it. Mm-hmm. Like if Lieutenant Governor Hosman couldn't flip a switch and be more effective in this debate, I probably wouldn't be kicking him while he's down. He can absolutely still have a huge influence on this debate. Austin says he has already. We'll take Austin at his word on that. But as we get into conference, he can absolutely turn it on. I mean, we have seen Lieutenant Governor Hosman be quite effective in this process, and we've seen bills that look dead come back to life. I remember that late night we had not too long ago over marijuana. I mean, there's a lot of things that he can do, and I hope that he does turn it on, and I hope it's for a better version, a compromised version. We desperately need expansion, y'all. So I hope we end up this session.
And what you've seen is a super successful young speaker, young in terms of age, because as I'm getting, Jason and I are probably about the same age. I still feel young, but also young in terms of his experience as a speaker. And all he's done is get W's so far. The things that he wanted to, that were part of his agenda, he's passed. He's done really well. But I wanted to say this, which is, so many big issues going on this session. There's going to be some compromises that are made. There's going to be some leverage that is used that the lieutenant governor may say, this is my number one my priority, or number two, how can I use that to how can I use something that the House really wants? No different. It's just, unless we were over here trading baseball cards, you're going to try to use leverage of your card versus what I have. So,
all right. Well, there have been other things, and there's been some excitement in some ways at the Capitol this week. It hasn't all been Medicaid expansion. It seems to be that every session we reach a point, at least in recent memory, where we get a Trey Lamar surprise or two. And this was the week for the Trey Lamar surprise. The first, I think, is we've chatted a little bit of kind of a fun bill. So out of nowhere, gaming committee in the House, a bill for a Jackson casino pops up. It quickly died in committee, and we can talk about the reasons why. But talk about surprises. What do you make of that?
It was a tremendous surprise. But there's a sort of an effort that came out of nowhere, made to try to build a casino in Jackson. It would have been within the CCID. It had to be within 6,000 feet of the Capitol. Most thought it was going to be over off the banks of the Pearl River, east of 55, kind of in the Heron Gear, old YMCA area. There were no casinos attached to it. Everybody was trying to figure out, which casino is this? The way the language in the bill stated was that it would essentially set up a procurement process, an RFP, that the Mississippi Gaming Commission would have run, that only current Mississippi casinos could have responded to, could have turned in a bid for. And then the Gaming Commission would have chosen one. Obviously, if you own a casino in Vicksburg, or you own a casino up the river, or even on the coast, you don't like this bill,
right?
Because you're going to be concerned about Jacksonians, or people who live around here, going, I can just go to the casino in Jackson. So, it was an interesting debate and argument, but technically, I don't think it came up in committee. Is it really interesting? And as we all know, things never die at that place, so maybe it pops up.
That's right.
Again.
Those Ways and Mean bill have a way of just popping up, though. What does it say about the power of some of those coastal and river representation to make sure this thing died a quick death?
Well, I want to go back to the Trey Lamar question, because he is a compelling figure, and we probably should just dedicate a segment of the program to him, because he does give us a lot to talk about. He's a throwback to a time when you had these sort of boss figures in the legislature that would just roll something out and steamroll you. He was built for like a backroom deal, like a cigar smoked room where
Sun
you
and
cut
Sand
a deal.
days, right?
And he would have played well at the Sun and Sand.
But he's a big idea guy. He's not scared to be bold. He's not scared to break the glass, because he's got something that he thinks is good for the state of Mississippi. You got to credit him for that.
He needs sensitivity training and probably a PR team, because he doesn't do a lot to help people to like him over there. But he is a big idea guy, and he does love to drop the bomb, and he did that here. Look, this was a backroom deal designed to help one person, designed to help one casino operator at the expense of the people that Austin just said, which is just a really amazing situation. Yeah. It didn't, and I think it is important. Austin made the note. Sometimes we get excited about these big ideas, and you can't take the chairman of Ways and Means lightly when he drops something. So I understand,
because there was support for this in that building.
Yeah, that's right. It got attention, so you can't ignore it. But I do think it's important to note it really didn't progress.
Right.
And then you asked about the power. Look, casino industry in this state has been a slowly developing thing over the process of decades, and those folks who have fought those old battles to establish their footprint and try to establish their
live
business,
within the rules.
They try hard to maintain where they are. And, the industry took a big hit with some things that have happened here, whether it be Katrina, whether it be the BP oil spill. There have been various different, and then just the general economy setbacks that we've had. And so they have a very powerful lobby, but they've also worked really hard to establish the foothold that they got. And so,
and they've had billions of dollars invested in the state for nearly 3 decades, maybe over 3 decades. When I can't remember if it was 93, 94, somewhere right around there when the gaming industry was legalized here, casinos were legalized here. So, these are folks who live within these rules. And as you said, that's a good point you made. There are man-made. Not man-made. Mother Nature has played havoc on the casino industry. Think about the flood in 2012-ish that killed Tunica. Okay, and then the dog track up in West Memphis gained all this popularity, and Tunica has suffered since then. So, but it was a really interesting issue to pop up out of nowhere, watch it get a lot of steam, and then ultimately watch it kind of fizzle out because others started going, oh, wait a minute, this may not be good for Vicksburg. This may not be good. The Jackson delegation, Hinds County delegation, I think was massively for this. So there were people who were very much support of this issue, and that's why I think it may not be dead. It may come back this year, certainly next year.
Well, and just as a person that doesn't cheerlead for any particular casino and really thinks industry should serve the public, not the other way around, y'all know I think we ought to do everything we can to be bucking up Jackson. And frankly, the state, in my opinion, at every turn does everything it can to break its neck not to help the city of Jackson and to grow it in the way that it should. So I always want to see us trying to build up Jackson, and Jackson ought to have the best. It ought to have industry. It ought to have all those things. So I hope that maybe this is in some backhanded way an indication, hey, let's look for ways to send a ton of industry to Jackson because we need it and it's good for our state.
Yep.
Staying on the Trey Lamar beat here for a second, and the surprise element, and you mentioned maybe needing some sensitivity training. Also this week he kind of built in language into a bill that had been around for tax breaks for foster care and foster care programs, and then it inserted tax breaks that would go to private schools. And there was some hot debate on the floor regarding this. This is the same author of a bill that sent, created a grant program for private schools with COVID money, CARES, I can't remember if it's ARPA or CARE, I think CARES Act money. But the point is that legislation is in front of the Supreme Court. Here we are again with Representative Lamar with legislation that favors financial breaks in some way, shape, or form for private schools. Where is this going? I mean, there was a lot of debate. It passed the House, but with lots of debate and lots of dissent from Democrats.
I hope nowhere, Michael. This is the Trey Lamar that slipped in an appropriation that nobody seemed to know was in a bill a couple of years back that became the subject of a lawsuit. This is Voucher Trey. And what we're talking about here is a tax credit that's a dollar-for-dollar credit so that folks who give money to a private school, they get a credit on their Mississippi tax bill. And so that's what it would be. It's basically a dollar-for-dollar tax credit, and they're increasing the percentage of increasing the amount that is allowed to $15 million.
And then expanding it, it's also expanded to include institutions that weren't previously part of that legislation.
Yeah, that's right. And so they're expanding it. And so what this is and I think y'all know better than me, but I don't think Trey would deny that he's a proponent of vouchers. And he's a proponent of sending public dollars to private schools. And so he has been looking in his role as Ways and Means Chair for every opportunity to do that. And this is the method that's preferred by the Private School Association because it doesn't come with added accountability. It's just a tax thing. It's $1. But what it does is it diverts money that would otherwise go to public schools, it would otherwise go to the public coffers, to private institutions. And yeah, those of us who are proponents of public schools and who believe that is our first priority as a state, and those are schools that have to accept children. as opposed to private schools that can selectively accept children. We think this is a bad idea, that you should take care of the public trust and allow private school students to pay for their way, because that's the nature of, private schools. So anyway, there was an effort by Robert Johnson to pass amendments that would allow for an expansion of those programs to foster care organizations that would actually, because you've heard a lot about foster care.
Right.
I'm a little bit afraid that those children get used as a pawn in these conversations, because every time that there's been an effort in the legislature to actually add foster care organizations to get this same tax incentive, it gets beaten back. And there were 4 efforts along those lines this week, and all of those efforts lost.
Yeah, I have not seen anything on this bill, just to be honest with you. So I don't know the exact details.
This was on Tuesday.
Yeah,
this was going on at the House.
I've never heard Trey Lamar say a word about voucher programs. If he has, that you correct me, but I've never heard. I mean, voucher programs, that does not come up at the Capitol. There may be some groups that want to do that, but do I think there's any serious chance of that happening right now? I don't think so. And of course, what voucher programs is, okay, Brandon's kids, whatever the dollar amount attached to his kids or my kids, no matter where they go to school, let's just say it's $5,000, okay, to educate them per year. They could take that $5,000 and go to Jackson Academy or whatever school that they want if they wanted to get out of a public school. I think that's just a simplistic view of a voucher program, right?
Yeah, and when I use the word voucher, it's good. I mean, I don't. This is not being cast as a voucher program. It's being cast as a tax incentive.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it's a voucher in the way that it functions. And I would say, Austin, there's a pretty active lobby for vouchers, but we use different terminology as we do in other issues to kind
school choice.
School choice. I'm a big proponent of school choice. I think we need more school choice. I think for those kids who are stuck in a bad school district just because of the zip code they live in, I think that's a very unfair situation. And I'm sure that I'm sure Trey Lamar, that's what he would say as well. But I think it is worth a debate. Okay, that. I'm not saying I'm for it. I really want to debate this. That a private school, an independent school, whether it's St. Andrews, I keep using JA because that's where my kids go to school, and I was on the board there for a long time. That there is an incentive to try to help that school. If there's an individual who wants to give a tax to get that tax write off to make a contribution there, I think that's worth a debate. We want to help. Certainly, our number one responsibility has to be to the public school system, K through 12 in Mississippi, and this legislature and past legislature have done a damn good job on that. Our test results, our scores show that. There's more work to be done, but it is an interesting debate to see if somebody wants to go try to help this specific school, whether it's in Senatobia or Saltillo, Jackson County or Jackson, Mississippi. That's an interesting debate to have, and I don't know what the right answer is. But I know why. I hear where you are. It doesn't mean we can't go help Brandon K through 12 in Mississippi, but also let this one individual who wants to go help do that.
Well, you finish the debate within yourself, and then come back here and we'll debate it out. But no, I think this is the way that we kind of play footsie with this stuff in this.
What do we play footsie with?
I kind of, I'm intrigued by this. Or I hear you. But look, we have to keep first things first.
I'm with you.
And our public schools, for all the good news we've had on that front, and we need to be honest about it. We still have public schools that desperately need more attention, and the system as a whole. And so, to me, until you manage
not disagreeing with you,
those portions, this is like an ancillary. Anyway.
I know. I guess I'm saying, hey, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Maybe this is a speed walk and blowing bubbles. But I hear you. I just think it's worth the debate. I'm not sitting here saying it's the right thing to do, but I don't want to just be closed off to it just because we're like, well, the whatever school district is an F and they feel like they don't have any money. I understand that. But let's have this debate, which is what we're doing.
I listened to the two of you, and you talk about there being a huge lobbying effort for vouchers or school choice, and you saying that you don't really see a lot of lawmakers talking about it, but at the same time, it's worth the debate. That brings in this kind of final question as we talk a little bit about ed funding, and that is the MAEP versus the House's new Inspire. And what has caught my attention lately about some of the rhetoric behind it is that both are essentially formulas that kind of land on a per pupil spending number, correct? But yet the governor this week has kind of propped up Inspire and used the words and used phrase along the lines of let's fund students, not systems. But if both are effectively per pupil funding, calculations, why is Inspire being kind of propped up right now as this money for students or funding students rather than systems? Is this kind of laying the foundation for this larger debate and push that some might anticipate?
I don't know what the governor is thinking. I know a lot of the governor's public pronouncements, and I don't think this is an unfair assessment, are incredibly political. I mean, almost everything that he says, ever since he said in his State of the State that he wants to bring us together, has been pretty divisive political rhetoric. So I don't know what he's talking about. But as between MAEP and Inspire, back to this question of failing school districts and school districts that are having trouble, what we learn and what legislators are going to be talking about this week as the week comes to a close is that almost every school district does better under MAEP than it does under Inspire. That's true immediately if these two bills were passed. It's true 3 years down the road. In the first year, 82 school districts do better under MAEP and the changes that the Senate has proposed than they would do under the Inspire Act. And to the point we were just having, the school districts, 37 or so at a poverty level of 95%, they get more funding under MAEP. When MAEP is something that we've talked about on this show, is something that we might want to make changes to, and certainly the Senate has suggested some, right. But at least it's kind of anchored by an objective number that has to do with what we believe it takes to educate a student. The Inspire math is squishy because it refuses to give you an objective standard by which students have to be educated. And so what that means is year to year, that number can change. And folks like me who care deeply that we fund our public schools are concerned that that number could be manipulated downward so that the legislature could take credit for full funding when all they did was just change the number down to a number that really doesn't mean full funding of a child or full funding of an education. And so that squishy math is problematic. What the Senate has done is worked within the existing program to just change some things around the edges, but I think they would say significant. But the other thing that the Inspire Act does not do, it doesn't take into account inflation early on. And whenever it does adjust for inflation 3 years down the road, the changes are small. And so when school districts, and the reason I'm speaking this way, Michael, is because whenever school districts evaluate education proposals, they look at how their district will fare. And so as superintendents and teachers pull out the charts to figure out, well, how does my school district do under Inspire versus MAEP? The overwhelming likelihood is that your school district is going to fare better with MAEP than it does Inspire. Now, why might the governor inject himself into a debate like this one when he's so concerned with the politics of this conversation? I have long thought that Governor Reeves has wanted to bring back the education issue so that we can kind of put it to bed. That's one of the rare policy points for years with Democrats kind of had the wind at their back on, where they could say they're not funding public schools.
Right.
Well, if you can play with the formula and make it be whatever you want, and whatever money you put into it that year equals full funding, you get rid of that whole argument that we're not fully funding education anymore, because you can say, well, we came up with a new formula. This is a new formula. This is the amount. We are fully funding it. So I feel like, coming back around to your question, why would the governor inject himself into this conversation? Because I think for a long time politically, he has wanted to take away that argument that Republicans aren't fully funding education. Replace it with a new program where you can make that argument and going down the road.
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No,
that's it. That's
go.
it. Yeah.
No, well, I mean, whether he was lieutenant governor or governor, Tate Reeves has been one of the greatest champions of public education, K through 12, that we've seen. And the test scores, again, actually very much back that up. And I again just said, look at the funding, look at the record funding that we've seen in school districts over the past 5, 8, 10 years. I hadn't seen the details of the Inspire program versus the current formula that we have right now. This is an issue that's going to end up in conference. We'll see if there's an agreement between the House and the Senate. Speaker White, Chairman Rob Robertson, who was the chairman of education. You mentioned Trey Lamar. All these guys, Kent McCarty, Jansen Owen. Those are two House Education Committee members who've worked very hard. They believe in this, and their take is, listen, we are going to fund based on the kid. Okay, are they English is their second language? Are they do they have some kind of disability? Are they in a rural area, an urban area? What are the different qualifications of how we need to make sure the right amount of money is being spent on that kid to make sure they're getting the best education they can? Versus we're going to base this, we're going to fund this based on the school district that they're in, so on and so forth. So it's a great debate. I love seeing debate on education because it means we're trying to get our education in Mississippi, in a better place than it is right now.
Right. We should absolutely celebrate, and we do agree with this, the fact that we're talking about greater funding for public schools. That is a good thing, and I do compliment Republicans in the House and Senate who have helped make that happen. That's an undeniable fact that we've done some good things in terms of increasing funding for public schools, and so we should absolutely be proud of that. The difference, though, Austin, is I think the rhetoric around we're trying to do this to the individual, but we eschew coming up with an objective number for what that means. That's squishy.
What do you mean an objective number? Like a dollar amount?
Like you have to come up, a dollar amount, because at the end of the day, all the rhetoric in the world doesn't change the math. And that's going to ultimately determine what school districts get to educate the child. And so I do think there's something to be said for the MAEP's effort to try to quantify what does it really cost in today's world to educate a child, including all the people that go into that. So I think that's where the Inspire Act is at a chief disadvantage. And we'll continue to have this discussion, but as much as I've been critical of the Senate over the last few weeks, it's worth saying, look, Dennis DeBar, David Blunt, members of the Senate Education Committee, they've done a good job. They've been part of all these different things that we've talked about. And I think in this case, their proposal is better for public schools.
Dennis DeBar is an excellent chairman. He is, a very smart guy, represents, a part of rural Mississippi and southeast Mississippi. And he knows a lot about education, has done a really good job during his tenure as chairman, which is at least 5 years and maybe longer than that. So I think this is going to be a great conversation for us to continue to have over the next few weeks because this thing's going to conference, I would imagine, and we'll see what gets worked out.
Yeah, and we'll certainly follow it. And to the point and to the question and to the rhetoric, nothing about Inspire has a portability piece that I know about. But I just find it interesting that the governor is trying to paint Inspire as the rhetoric fund students, not systems, is rhetoric often used by school choice and voucher proponents. And the governor is trying to assign that language to the Inspire Act, which, as it stands right now, does not do any of that.
There's some, look, this has been we may be getting a bit in the weeds now,
yes.
but look, people who tune in to At Issue, they're in the weeds people. We said on an earlier program that some of the folks who helped to write Inspire have been part of the school choice movement. There's been some concern that when you start playing with programs, it could be a Trojan horse for something else. Folks like me know that there's a lobby for school choice and vouchers in Mississippi. Know that there's an interest in diverting public funds to private institutions. And we suspect that members of the legislature who are part of that movement are always trying to get a little bit closer to that. So most of those people live in the House. Some of them helped write this bill. No question on earth that they thought about that in some form or fashion. Does it do it in this bill? No. But might it make it easier to do it down the road? Possibly.
All right.
It'll be a fun debate.
It'll be a fun debate. Yeah. All right. And then, I said, it'll debate we will follow, but that's all we have for this week. This has been At Issue on MPB Think Radio, a weekly discussion about the 2024 Mississippi legislative session. If you can't catch us live each Friday at 6:30, At Issue can be streamed on demand on MPB Public Media app, or you can subscribe to the At Issue podcast. Each week's podcast includes an extended version of our weekly interview, as well as an extended version of our roundtable discussion. And if you'd like to see what we all look like, the full interview and roundtable are available on YouTube. Just search Mississippi Public Broadcasting At Issue. I'm Michael Guidry from all of us at MPB. Thanks for listening.